My name is Michelle Jordan. I'm the managing attorney for the Fulton Family Law Unit of the Atlanta Legal Aid Society. The Atlanta Legal Aid Society provides free legal assistance for low-income residents in the metro Atlanta area. Family violence is a crime of power and control. For many victims, the most dangerous time is when they try to separate from the abuser. A victim is more likely to be murdered after they have taken steps to separate from the abusive relationship. Many abusers stalk their former partner in an effort to continue to control, manipulate, and intimidate them. Stalking is a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week crime of terror. Stalking victims often have their day-to-day lives disrupted to the point that they must change their normal activities to avoid the stalker's contact. The more access the stalker has to the victim, the more successful the stalking will be. Stalking is an inherent behavior for family violence abusers. The majority of women who are stalked by current or former intimate partners also report having been physically assaulted by these partners, and 1/3 of women report having been sexually assaulted by the same partners who stalked them. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, nearly 3 in 4 of all victims knew their offender in some capacity. Women are more likely to report being stalked by an intimate partner, whereas men are more likely to report being stalked by a stranger or acquaintance. Stalking behavior is not necessarily about getting the victim back in the relationship, but becomes more about getting back at the victim for trying to leave the relationship. A majority of criminal stalking cases will be generated from the family violence orders, such as pretrial bond release orders and temporary protective orders. It is important that these violations are appropriately charged to maximize victim safety during these times. 4 out of every 5 stalking victims are women. While statistics indicate that stalking is not a gender-specific crime, men are overwhelmingly the majority of stalkers, while women are the majority of stalking victims. In a national violence against women study, 94% of stalkers identified by female victims and 60% of stalkers identified by male victims were male. It is also not uncommon for men to stalk other men and for women to stalk other women. Victims of intimate partner stalking are more likely to experience physical and sexual violence than other stalking victims. Intimate partner stalkers are the most common and the most physical in their stalking behaviors. Many cases of intimate partner stalking are never charged as stalking, but instead as a variety of other charges such as criminal trespass, harassing communication, disorderly conduct, and even physical assault. Intimate partner stalkers are well equipped for their activities because they have so much information on the victim's residence, employment, and activities. Many times victims view the stalking behaviors as those of someone who just can't let go of the relationship. When the partners have children in common, the risk of contact is even greater. Intimate partner stalking, especially after the end of the relationship, is a real threat to the safety of victims. Intimate partner stalking tends to escalate the frequency and severity of physical and sexual assault. Victims and investigating officers alike should be encouraged to never minimize threats to the victim or family members. Intimate partner violence and intimate partner stalking are crimes of power and control. Previous behaviors in the relationship are a good predictor of future violence by the stalker. Reports of non-acquaintance stalking are more rare than reports of intimate partner stalking. As a general rule, intimate partner stalkers use more violence, threats of violence, and personal contact. They will also leave more tangible evidence because of the nature of their stalking activities. The investigator, with the cooperation of the victim, may have access to far more evidence in intimate partner stalking cases. Many victims of intimate partner stalking fail to see the danger of the stalker's activities. It is common for a victim to believe that the stalker is just still in love. This minimization often increases the danger for the victim and makes the investigator's job more difficult. It is important to remember that stalking is normally an attempt to intimidate and control the victim rather than an attempt to get the victim back in the relationship. Many stalking incidents don't seem threatening or criminal in nature. The investigating officer has the responsibility of tying the incidents together to show a pattern of conduct which has no legitimate purpose. In other words, the conduct is specifically for the purpose of intimidating and harassing the victim. The victim's perception of the incident, along with the documentation of prior incidents, is critical to establishing probable cause for the stalking charge. Previous police reports, medical records, and previous family violence protective orders are great evidence of prior violence and intimidation. The power and intimidation of intimate partner stalking comes from the victim's knowledge that her stalker is her former partner. Intimate partner stalkers will show up at the victim's home, school, church, and place of employment. This type of stalker also leaves phone messages, letters, cards, and gifts to let the victim know that they were there. These stalkers will confront the victim whenever he or she is accessible. Property destruction crimes are very common for this group as well. Intimate partner stalkers know how to push the victim's buttons. It is imperative that the victim keeps as much evidence as possible. The victim should be encouraged to document every incident, no matter how insignificant it may seem. A stalking incident log is a good way to secure this evidence in a consistent manner. Stalking is a crime of terror, and many victims are forced to change their normal routines to avoid contact with the stalker. Intimate partner stalkers have an advantage in that they know so much about the victim and have so much access to them. The victim needs to be encouraged to make everyone around them aware of the stalker's behavior. This can help limit the stalker's ability to reach the victim.
My name is Lori Anderson, and I'm an attorney with the Fulton County Family Law Unit of the Atlanta Legal Aid Society. I'm also the co-chair of the Fulton County Family Violence Task Force. The crime of stalking is based on 5 basic elements. First, the investigator must show a pattern of activity. Second, that activity must occur in a place somewhere other than the stalker's home. Third, the conduct must be intimidating and harassing in nature. And fourth, must be without the victim's consent. Lastly, the conduct must place the victim in fear. Documentation of every incident and establishment of prior history are key elements in a stalking case. The victim should be encouraged to have no contact at all with the stalker. Any contact increases the danger to the victim, encourages the stalker, and may undermine the prosecution of the criminal case. Aggravated stalking occurs when stalking activities begin or continue after the issuance of any judge's order prohibiting such conduct, such as family violence protective orders and stalking protective orders. Documentation of intimidating, harassing, or violent prior history can often be used to establish probable cause for the charge. In the case of Burke v. State, the Georgia Court of Appeals defined the contact as having to be without consent and clearly with no other purpose than to intimidate or harass the victim. Documentation of prior incidents before or after the order is issued can be used to establish the intimidating nature of the contact. The Burke case appeared to require a pattern of conduct in violation of a judge's order to find that aggravated stalking had occurred. However, in the subsequent Louisier case, the court clarified this issue. The Louisier defendant argued that based on Burke, the state must prove that the defendant violated a protective order multiple times in order to prove aggravated stalking. The court disagreed and said that although Burke required showing a pattern of harassing and intimidating behavior, nothing in that opinion suggests that multiple violations of a protective order are required, as long as the contact is without consent and is intimidating and harassing in nature. The Herbert case took the Louisier decision one step further and said that although the Burke case required the state to show a pattern of harassing and intimidating behavior, plus a violation of a protective order to find aggravated stalking, the state did not have to prove multiple violations of a protective order. The court also held that prior difficulties between the parties are sufficient evidence to show a pattern. It is the responsibility of the investigating officer to document the pattern of violent and/or intimidating behaviors throughout the relationship. The misdemeanor charge of violation of a family violence protective order applies any time that a defendant knowingly and in a nonviolent manner violates any condition of the order. Unlike aggravated stalking charges, this charge does not require the establishment of a pattern of conduct without the consent of the victim. All that is required is the violation of any condition of the order. Conditions of the order may only be amended by the judge and cannot be changed by agreement of the parties. The contact may even be consensual, and it does not have to be intimidating in nature. A good stalking investigation includes victim and witness testimony, documentation of any prior history of events between the stalker and victim, and documentation of any physical evidence of the stalker's activities. The victim has a key role in documenting this evidence. Law enforcement should establish the relationship, timeline of events, and have the victim provide and document as much information as possible. Be sure to secure evidence that captures the stalking activities. Law enforcement should advise the victim about a stalking protective order and encourage the victim to keep a stalking incident log. Instruct the victim to have no contact with the stalker and to make family, friends, and employers aware of the stalking activities. If possible, increase patrol frequency in the vicinity of the victim. In intimate partner stalking cases, law enforcement has the responsibility to build the criminal case along with the responsibility of keeping the victim as safe as possible. It is important to never forget that intimate partner stalking is about power and control.